Welcome to Focus Washington. I'm Chuck Conconi. My guest today is Governor Cabraal, who is of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and you're responsible for the monetary growth of Sri Lanka, a country that's had a devastating 26-year civil war and has only been over 1 year now. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now tell me, the Civil War was pretty violent, particularly up tied in the Tamil northern regions. What is being done to help reconstruct that area and help those people there? Because is there still bitterness remaining?
Actually, what we had was not really a civil war, but what we had was a terrorist war, which we had to deal with. And over a long period of time, it had been kind of dealt with in not a very serious manner. But over the last 3 to 4 years, there was a serious attempt made, and we were able to show the world that terrorism can be contained by military means, and that has been done. So in the aftermath of that, there has been a tremendous surge of reconciliation efforts, as well as reconstruction efforts, as well as rehabilitation efforts. And this,
in what way specifically are you helping those people there?
Yeah, you see, first step is to ensure that they could get back to normalcy, that their entrepreneurial skills will be given effect to, that lending is done so that they will have access to finance, so that they can rebuild their lives. Now that is happening. And while that is happening, there is an urgency to set the infrastructure back to normal. And that means hospitals, schools, electricity being restored, the road network being redone, and the government functions in those areas. That also is now happening, which means that there is a concerted effort from all sides to ensure that normalcy is restored as fast as possible. We have seen the fisheries industry taking a new outlook, animal husbandry as well as farming taking a new momentum. We have seen entrepreneurship developing in those areas, education being restored. So it's always painful to come out of.
I mean, yeah, I was going to say that. Is there a bitterness factor there? That these people, it's only been a year. Is there still some concern? I mean, is there a way, is this economic development helping to resolve that?
Absolutely. You see, what is vital will be the economic development. If people have hope and that they begin to see that today is better than yesterday, then they will realize that tomorrow can even be better. And that is the message that we need to ensure that is given to them. And I believe that message is being given. The number of banks that have been set up in those areas in order to ensure that credit is provided to them, the number of government offices that help them, the schools that have been reconstructed, the electricity that has been restored, all that gives hope to those people. And I believe that will be the key to the redevelopment as well as the reconciliation. So we are optimistic about it. We have seen economic development taking place, and I think the first year, although it was the most difficult one, gives us hope that the second and the third years will certainly be better, and that we could look forward to a much better time in the future.
Well, there's a lot of money coming from outside the country to help in development, and there's some concern that too much of it is coming from China. Is that a concern of yours for their investments?
Actually, there has been a lot of money coming into the country because Sri Lanka was always seen as a country that will have tremendous potential for growth as well as economic development. So naturally, there will be money that will come into the country. Now, there have been different appetites on the part of different people when they invest in Sri Lanka. The Chinese particularly have been keen to invest in infrastructure. So they have been providing loans to the government in order to set up power plants as well as a harbor. The American hedge funds have been very keen to invest in the government paper, the bonds as well as the bills, and we have seen almost $1.5 billion, much more than what the Chinese have invested in Sri Lanka, being invested by the American hedge funds and investing companies. The Malaysians have been keen to invest in the infrastructure, particularly in relation to the telecommunication, the Indians in relation to the railways. So we see a varied type of investment taking place in Sri Lanka, depending on the different appetites of the different countries. So I think...
And you feel you can control that investment process? It's not going to affect you?
Absolutely not. Actually, the only way it will affect us is to ensure that we continue with our growth momentum, and that's something that we would like to see happening.
Well, in addition to the war, you had the problem of the great tsunami there too, and people have been reluctant, I think, in many ways, to go to Sri Lanka for your beaches and that kind of thing. Are you in danger of getting into an economic situation like Greece or Iceland or some of the other countries of the world?
Very unlikely. What we have seen in Sri Lanka is that we have had a controlled growth where it has not been spectacular, but we have seen a little bit of the slack that has been there as a result of the terrorist situation that we had now being taken up. So we have seen people showing a tendency to come back to Sri Lanka and visit Sri Lanka. Just to give you one little point, in 1982, Sri Lanka had 500,000 tourists coming into the country, at which time Thailand had just 1 million. Last year, Thailand had 13 million, whereas Sri Lanka still had about 450,000, which shows that there is a tremendous potential for Sri Lanka, which is now being considered and given effect to. We would probably be reaching a target of 2.5 million tourists in the next 5 years, 5 to 6 years. And the economic infrastructure that should support that is now being put in place, and we are comfortable that that would happen.
Well, that can show in some ways that people are concerned with your country. How do you build the confidence that it's a good country to come back to for tourism?
Yeah, mainly we want to give the message across that Sri Lanka is open for business. It's a new era. It has been a country that has been open for business for a long time, but since we had the debilitating terrorist war being present in our country, that definitely thwarted people from coming in. But that's over. There is hope, there is peace in our country, and the peace dividend is being enjoyed by everyone. And we like to see the tourism booming, and I'm sure that we will see a tremendous inflow of tourists to come.
Time for one just quick question. We're wrapping up, and maybe it's a big question. There's a power shift in Southeast Asia. Where do you see Sri Lanka fitting in?
Actually, Sri Lanka has been, to a great extent, isolated from the rest of the world. We have been mainly focusing in the South Asian region. But today, we have seen Sri Lanka's impact being shown across the world. I think the message that we have given to the world in relation to the dealing with terrorism is an important one. We have dealt with the financial crisis in an effective manner, where we have not had any major problem occurring in our country. And South Asia is now emerging as a new area which can have a tremendous impact on the rest of the world. You have seen India growing, Sri Lanka is growing, and these are good openings for South Asia to show off to the rest of the world, and we are happy to be a part of that.
Governor Cabraal, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you.
I'm Chuck Conconi, and this has been Focus Washington.